From Thom Hartmann's Daily Take Substack. The Strongman's Test Run, and Why the Next Deployment Will Be Bigger, Longer, and Deadlier. Deploying troops without police training, defying the courts, and threatening the media, Trump is importing dictator tactics in plain sight and daring Americans to stop him. Published August 13th, 2025. The following is a song inspired by this article.
Boots on the pavement, steel in the sun. Shadows fall heavy where freedom once run. They say it's for safety. They say it's for peace. But the lines start to blur when armies replace police. When armies replace police, the streets turn cold and the truth's on lease. Riots fade away like whispers in the night when armies replace police. There's no end in sight. The courts are ignored, the press under fire, the laws bend and break at the will of a liar. The crowd holds their ground, the rifles don't cease. Who protects the people when armies replace police? When armies replace police, the streets turn cold and the truth's on lease. Riots fade away like whispers in the night when armies replace police. There's no end in sight. History warns in a voice we know. Once boots fill the streets, they're reluctant to go. A nation can vanish without a shot. Just uniforms marching where justice is not. When armies replace police, the flag still flies, but freedoms decrease. Hold the line, raise your voice, make them see when armies replace police. We all cease to be.
He says he's deploying the military to Washington, D.C. because of a, quote, crime emergency, end quote. But armies don't do policing. Their job and their training is to blow things up and kill people. They have no training in evidence chain of custody, arrest procedures, civil rights protections, criminal investigation, or any other aspect of policing. Sending a militia to do policing is like inviting the neighborhood butcher to perform your brain surgery. In America, it's also illegal. Under the Posse Comitatus Act, an American military is explicitly forbidden from engaging in any police activities against civilian populations. Armies are really good, however, in facing down large crowds of protesters. In 2020, after Alexander Lukashenko stole the election in Belarus, over 1 million people showed up in the streets to protest his increasingly violent repression of dissent. He called out the military and put down the protests, killing dozens and arresting over 25,000 people, many of whom were tortured while in custody. In 2021, when massive pro-Navalny protests broke out in Russia, Putin called out the Rosgvardia, National Guard, a new masked militia he had created in just a few years earlier, answerable only to him, that was tasked with identifying and imprisoning immigrants and also used against his personal enemies. They showed up with armored vehicles, helicopters, and troops with automatic weapons to put down the protesters. Over 11,000 people were, quote, arrested, end quote. Many never to be seen free again. On December 3, 2024, then-President Yoon Suk Yeol of South Korea declared emergency martial law, justifying as a necessary move to suppress what he termed, quote, anti-state, end quote, forces, specifically his political opposition. Because Yoon hadn't pre-positioned the military or prepared for the eruption in Seoul's streets like Lukashenko did and Putin did, protesters succeeded in driving him out of office. Trump is planning to go the Lukashenko and Putin route, and is determined not to go down the way Yoon did. That, along with distracting us from his alleged raping of underage girls with his, quote, best friend, end quote, Jeffrey Epstein, is why he's militarizing Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles. These are test runs for when his crimes, corruption, and excesses, particularly if the feds intervene to help Republicans steal the 2026 elections, become so severe that Americans in the streets are large enough numbers to present a threat to his regime. He learned that lesson from the George Floyd protests and may well be visiting Putin in Alaska this week to get further instruction in how to deal with protesters. It's why the Pentagon is proposing a, quote, domestic civil disturbance quick reaction force, end quote, made up of military members who can deploy within hours to any city in America to put down, quote, civil disturbances, end quote. If Trump really intended to do something about crime in D.C., he would have directed his efforts toward fixing the root causes of crime: poverty, unemployment, illiteracy, drug addiction, homelessness, and lead in the water pipes, all areas where D.C. ranks toward the worst of American cities. If D.C. was truly lacking policing resources, he'd be sending in military police who are actually trained in policing, or shifting budgets around to give more money to the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department itself. But of course, he did none of the above. Instead, he's sending in troops. The last time Trump was confronted with protesters, he demanded General Mark Milley have soldiers, quote, shoot them in the legs, end quote. Milley refused. So Trump and Hegseth have decapitated the senior ranks of the military, replacing them with toadies, willing them to do whatever orange leader wants. You can see where this is going. We're in the early stages of autocratic breakthrough, the consolidation of power phase, when a leader who's planning to turn a democracy into an autocracy seizes control of all the various branches of government and makes sure the military is entirely loyal to him rather than to the rule of law. So, Now he is testing how far he can go and what kind of pushback his actions will produce from the public, the press, and the legal system. The Trump administration has arrested a Democratic mayor, a Democratic judge, a Democratic member of Congress, and beaten a Democratic United States senator to the ground. They've deployed the military over the objections of the governor and mayors into first Los Angeles and now Washington, D.C. The nation's chief law enforcement officer, Department of Homeland Security NOM, said, quote, "We're staying here to liberate the city of Los Angeles from the socialists and the burdensome leadership that this governor and that this mayor has placed on this country and what they have tried to insert into the city," end quote. And the National Guard troops are still there. Angelenos and D.C. residents, and, by extension, all Americans who monitor the spectacle on TV, are expected to get used to having heavily armed military forces in our streets. Soon, Trump's people hope it'll all seem, quote, normal, end quote, just like they're trying to normalize secret masked Rochvardia-style police who refuse to identify themselves, abuse citizens, and routinely break the law themselves. The president demanded a military parade for his birthday and is threatening to revoke broadcast licenses from television networks. He's shut down funding for NPR and PBS. The Trump regime is ignoring court orders, including one from the Supreme Court, and Trump's press secretary says, quote, "The courts should have no rule here. There is a troubling and dangerous trend of unelected judges inserting themselves into the presidential decision-making process," end quote. The Republicans on the Supreme Court have given him immunity from prosecution for crimes he commits while president, and rolled over repeatedly as he openly and blatantly violates both constitutional requirements and historic political norms. Republican members of Congress, with the possible exception of Kentucky's Thomas Massie, are terrified of Trump and have already sacrificed their independence and power. In the Senate, only Thom Tillis meaningfully stood against Trump, and he was forced into retirement as a result. With all three branches of government under his effective control, Trump is now threatening the media, crushing the independence of colleges and universities, receiving tribute and bribes from major corporations, and demanding changes in our voting systems that will make it harder for anyone who is not white and upper middle class to vote. Don't be fooled. Trump and his billionaires and fascists he's assembled into his cabinet are right in the middle of the process of permanently ending democracy in our country. First he went after immigrants and trans people. Now he's targeting poor people in D.C. Next, as he follows the Putin-Lukashenko-Orban-Erdogan playbook, it will be Democrats and white protesters, particularly if he tries to steal the 2026 election. Standing against this coming onslaught will take considerable courage. Hitler put down the White Rose Society. Putin killed Navalny and arrested his lawyers and supporters. Lukashenko and Erdogan had their troops fire on angry crowds. The best hope is that when the crackdowns come, enough of us can mobilize to begin about a rebooting of our democracy like average people did in South Korea last year as they restored democracy to that nation. This is not a drill. These people have revealed themselves as genuine white supremacist fascists, and they're not planning to back down or go away. Trump's deployment of troops to L.A. and D.C. prove it.